Hey guys, welcome to Night Owls. It is Sunday, April 7th. I need to get my cough thing. Sasha and I are both getting over colds. I think mine's kind of progressed further than Sasha's, so I'm pretty much over my cold. How's your cold been, Sasha?
Good. I just have to blow my nose. It's kind of annoying, but it's not. It
Yeah,
could be
it wasn't a
worse.
real bad cold. Maybe it was
No.
COVID. I don't know, but
Yeah,
it's
my friend was just telling me she's getting over strep, so it's nothing that bad.
yeah, no, it was a pretty mild one. So, yeah, guys, we have a lot to talk about. Thank you for joining us. First of all, we do this usually every Sunday if we're in the mood. It's a very different type of show I do. I do my Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday show every week at 11 a.m. Wednesday, I have Happy Homelands at 7 p.m. in the evening. This cough. And then we have a roundtable Friday nights or Sunday afternoons. A lot of fun. Be sure to join that. Busy time. But on Sundays, we're not so much focused on politics, but if you have a political question or anything like that, we'll deal with it. We appreciate the contributions. But mostly we just talk about culture and movies. We'll probably talk about movies because we saw two movies this weekend, Sasha, right?
Yes.
And we'll talk about that too. So, and just a little housekeeping stuff. If you want to interact with the show, we appreciate it. There's a few ways. YouTube has super chats, Rumble has rants, Power Chat right here. That's a great way to do it too. We get that day or night. So just send that in. And there's also Stream Elements is another way to do it. So a couple of ways to do it. And we really appreciate you being here. And Sasha, just a couple of things before we get into the whole movie stuff and what we saw, tying it back to culture. I guess tomorrow is the day of the great eclipse. You probably hear the dog barking in the
Yeah, right
background.
when you start talking, she's like, ooh.
I know it's dark out. She's looking out. Maybe she sees a deer or something. So apologize for that, guy. I try to keep it quiet in the studio, but she gets yapping sometimes.
Hmm.
Yeah, the eclipse is tomorrow, at least in Arkansas. It goes through the path. And I said something wrong. I said near Fort Smith. It's actually near Little Rock. I guess it's going to be a big to do. They're expecting hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of people to come into Arkansas to see it, which I think is kind of incredible. I kind of doubt that's the case. But we're going to have the total eclipse of the sun in a certain path. Not where I live. Where I live and where Sasha lives, it's going to be around 95% eclipse. But there's certain cities, I think Russellville and Little Rock and Texarkana. I thought about going, but I decided I don't know. I don't want to deal with the traffic. And when all's said and done, it's just, just gets dark for a little bit, then it gets light again. So
Yeah.
they're kind of cool, but I don't know. It's just not worth the gas and the headache of all the people that are going to be
Who
there.
knows if there are going to be that many people in town? Brandon doesn't think there are.
I don't think either. I think the news always hypes everything, gets it too excited. So, uh, and also we've been just so busy with other stuff. Sasha's father's home, we're still clearing that out. We did that on Saturday, right?
Yeah, we went there
And
for a little bit.
yeah, we got some trash out of it and pulled some stuff back. And I got a neat horse statue I'm going to show you. I'm going to put it behind me, I think, once I clear out some room. So it's real heavy. It's really cool. So I got that here. So I will do an updated video on that too, the progress. We did one last year after he died, showing the state it was in. And we've made some progress. We have a long ways to go, but that is kind of good. So
Yeah, I've
uh,
washed I don't know how many bags of clothes and toys and
yeah,
a
it's
lot.
pretty amazing, really. So we're happy about that, and we're happy about all you guys being here tonight. And last week too, I got to meet a viewer, a longtime viewer. He said he's been watching me since 2008. He lives in Oklahoma. That was nice to do. I think we ate at Village Inn and we had a good time talking. And a lot of stuff coming up. And this weekend was busy too because we saw two movies. On Saturday night, we saw Late Night with the Devil. I think that was the name of it. The movie, is that
Yes.
the name of the movie?
Yeah, Late Night with the Devil.
And it was hilarious because they had what the premise was is this fictional show, like a Johnny Carson type show in the 1970s, but it wasn't Johnny Carson. It was a show that was called Night Owls. I kid you not,
Yeah,
Night Owls. I'm like, wait a minute, they stole our idea.
I
That's
did.
our, we got a trademark on that. They can't use Night Owls. But this movie used Night Owls. So this talk show host, the basic premise is he did, was a late night midnight show out of New York City live, kind of competing with Carson, and he was doing okay, but the ratings were starting to slip, so he was having to do more and more things, kind of cringy things, trying to get the ratings up, skits and kind of wild guests. And eventually, the final show was on Halloween. Was it 1977? It was supposed to take place.
77.
Yeah. And he had this, it was supposed to be the scary show where he had like a psychic on first. And then he had this girl that was supposedly possessed. And it dealt with that show. And the premise of the show, they're just showing you the raw tape, a la Blair Witch Project or something like that, a little bit like what really happened here. So that was sort of the setup to it, and I won't do a lot of spoilers. I mean, you guys can watch it. First of all, I would recommend it. It was a good show. I don't recommend many movies anymore because there's not a plot. There's just CGI and explosions. Then you have all the damn diversity shoved down your throat. And I think this took place in the mid 70s. You didn't really have any of the homosexuality, LGBTQ. You did have a couple of black characters, and I think one guy was like Indian, but it wasn't obnoxious. So the movie itself kept me entertained, and it was pretty thoughtful. What was your thoughts on that, Sasha?
Yeah, I enjoyed it, and I like how they set it up, where it took place in the 70s, and it was kind of like the whole movie was just this, like the movie took place during what was supposed to be this show that aired, this late night show, except for like the very beginning because it had an intro to explain the guy's life.
Right.
Other than that, like the whole movie was pretty much just like during the filming of this show, which I
And
thought was
just
pretty good.
and I forgot to add, this was considered in the horror genre, so it was like a horror movie because things went terribly bad, maybe on the show, and that's something we'll talk about a little. And one of the things I liked about the show, which I thought was similar to American Psycho, is that the name of the movie, American Psycho?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
when you watch that movie, you can look at it like, well, wait a minute, this isn't all on face value. Some of this just may be in his mind, his imagination. And this movie, for the like 90%, you think everything's pretty well straight. It's what you're seeing. But the last 10% of the movie, the last 10, 20 minutes of the movie, things get really weird. And it makes you question what really happened in the movie earlier versus what's in his mind. And I'm still debating, and I was kind of looking online what people thought. I I have to think about it some more, but obviously some of it was just in his mind, but some of it was real. What did you think, Sasha, on that?
yeah. I mean, I think at least like part of it was real, but the end, it's kind of like it leaves up to the climax open for interpretation of what you think happened. Like, did you think it was in his mind, or I don't know. It's hard to tell people without like ruining the movie because you'd have to
Well,
give
it gets like
spoilers.
real supernatural at the end. And part of and I'm going to talk about the theme of the movie because that's kind of interesting too. It actually does have a theme. And the theme is, I think, is because his whole goal in life was to beat Johnny Carson, to be the rich and successful, the number one talk show. And he could never do that. And so the theme is what he was sacrificing in his life to get to that point. Like one of the things, his wife got cancer and died. That's not a spoiler. It's early on in the show. And he ended up having to do kind of cringy skits. It's one of those things you have to get wilder and wilder and do things you might not like to try to chase the ratings. And a different guest that may have not been his original idea. So I think the whole theme of the story is, what do you sacrifice in your life, and is it worth it to get what you want? Did you get that impression too, Sasha?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so that was interesting in that sense. And there was also an element that he was part of the Bohemian Grove. That's a place in California where Alex Jones really got famous years ago in the 90s, where rich people, and it's not a conspiracy theory, it's a men's club of in California of a lot of the rich and elite, and it's kind of like a resort. And Richard Nixon went there, a lot of people. And one of the rules when you go there, you're supposed to keep all conversations private and what you do private. But there's a real conspiratorial idea that they do secret rituals, orgies, or sacrifices to devils, because they do have like this big owl statue that they do rituals to. And so you got to ask yourself, well, do they do it as just a LARPy thing, kind of just a frat boy thing? Because a lot of frats, the Skull and Bones Society and all this type of stuff, they do a lot of stuff that's kind of paganish, but it's not meant to necessarily be real. It's more of a tongue-in-cheek thing. So there's an argument, well, that's what they do at the Bohemian Grove. It's not, it's not really serious. They do have this. But other people say, no, it is very serious. And it's like the Illuminati that controls everything. Have you heard about that place, Sasha?
Just that Alex Jones went there. I honestly don't know much more about it. I've heard about it. I just thought it was a place where they like worship Satan or something. I don't know. Well, I don't really know like much about it. And I thought they kind of hinted at that in this movie.
Yeah, the movie had the idea that they do, and he was part of it, and somehow he did some sacrifices to get his power. And it's the old thing, if you sell your soul to the devil, he'll give you what you want, but there's always a catch. You pay more than you think you're going to get, and it was kind of that type of thing. I mean, now I'm talking real life. We don't know because it's still confidential what they do there, but I think they would say, no, it's not Satan worship. It's just a way for some, the powerful people to get together and exchange stuff candidly without cameras around so they can be honest. And they do have some pagan shit there, but it's just old, it goes back over 100 years. So it doesn't really mean anything. But then other people believe it really does. I've always been of the opinion such. I'm always skeptical of the idea that there's just a handful of people that behind the scenes, like the Rothschilds or whatever, is secretly ruling the world. Now, obviously, the elite, the rich and powerful people, they do control a lot of the world, but I don't know. I'm always skeptical it's just a handful of people. I think there's a lot of different agendas, even the World Economic Forum and all those type of things, a trilateral commission. I have no doubt they do a lot of bad things, but I don't think it's some secret conspiracy. What was your take on that?
I mean, I don't know. I've never been there, so
you don't have an opinion?
Well, I mean, you never know about these elite people. They could be doing evil things. I mean, I don't know. You remember that spirit cooking and all that? It could be like that. Who knows? But maybe it's nothing. I really don't know. I like to think, for the sake of this movie, that it was really bad.
Yeah.
It was just like that. It was like something where they were like drinking blood and sacrificing like creatures and stuff just because it made the movie scarier.
I'm open to it because, Stanley Kubrick did a show Eyes Wide Shut. Do you ever see that movie?
I saw it years ago, but honestly, I don't remember it. It's been that long since I've seen it. I probably saw it right after it came out, so I don't remember it very well.
Yeah, Tom Cruise was in there and Nicole Kidman. That's when they were still together, right?
Yeah, I think they broke up right after that movie came out.
Yeah. Are you Google searching something? I hear that clicking there.
No, I was just closing some tabs.
They were like, in that movie. And that movie, I didn't consider his best movie. I guess he died right after the movie when they were editing it, so that adds to the conspiracy. But that was the idea that these elites, there was basically some occult influence. And I don't know if Stanley Kubrick believed that or that was just kind of a cool horror thing to do. But it does make you wonder, like with the spirit cooking and some of the symbols that they use, but you never know if they're being ironic or they're being serious about it. And so I'm open to both. I know there's a lot of evil stuff goes on, but I'm a little bit skeptical. There's like a handful of people in a volcano that actually seriously control everything.
I mean, I don't know. It might be just that they have influence on things. Like,
Yeah.
what is that thing that they have all the rich people come to it every year?
Oh, the World Economic Forum.
Yeah. But it's like
Yeah.
they maybe do just invite some people there because they can, but who knows? Like
Yeah.
what they really say when I mean, I have no doubt some of these people are evil and they want to rule people.
So that was basically the gist of that. Let me see my Rumble, see if we have any rants. We don't. So that was basically the gist of that program. And so the movie. I mean, I thought the movie was good though. I would recommend it.
I
I thought
enjoyed it.
the little girl that was in it, that was demon possessed. She was a really good actress. I really enjoyed her.
She was. She looked really 70s too. She had that
She
look.
did.
They had her
Yeah.
hair and everything in the
Yeah.
outfit. She looked like Little House on the Prairie
Hmm.
from that time. Like this
Yeah.
TV show, not the movie, not the books, Little House on the Prairie.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It
it was
was. That's what
enjoyable.
added. What'd you say?
It was an enjoyable movie. I liked it. Even if you didn't understand the ending, you
Hmm.
can just kind of interpret it how you want. It reminded me of like a David Lynch movie or something.
Yeah. It was pretty good that way. So I did like that too. Let's see here. So then that's about all I had with that movie. And then today Sasha took me to, and I'm like probably the only guy in America that's my age that's never saw Gone with the Wind. I never read the book. I never saw the movie until today. Obviously, I knew the basic premise takes place in the Civil War, and I knew, Scarlett O'Hara, is that her name, and Rhett Butler, and the famous line, "Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn." I saw that, but I had no idea really for the most part. I thought it just dealt with the Civil War, and I was telling Sasha when we saw the movie, when it came to intermission, I'm like, well, boy, this is where I thought the movie would end after the Yankees defeat the South. But half the movie is really after the Civil War happens, and it deals kind of their relationships, her with Scarlett O'Hara and her various love interest, and Rhett Butler, and all the interactions there. So I could see why a lot of women would like the movie because it was more a relationship movie. There wasn't so much war scenes, if any, that I can remember. I don't think there was any.
If you read the book has more war stuff. Like the book was way more like, I don't know. I mean, it had the relationship stuff too, but the book was like over 1,000 pages long. But it did go into a lot more of the war stuff. Like you heard him mention things like that guy's troops had no shoes. They went into a lot more of that stuff, like people writing her home and how horrible like it was to be in that war. That may be one of the worst wars, if not the worst war that like we've been involved with.
Yeah, 100% it was. It was the most bloody. More Americans died in that war than any other war. I think more than all the other wars combined in America.
We saw in the paper they had where they were trying to see if Ashley Wilkes was on that. Remember all that was like dead, dead, like all these people were dead. The list just went on and on.
It was a horrible, bloody war.
Mm-hmm.
And it was interesting to me. We sat down in the movie, so it's going to be 4 hours. It's pretty full. There's still an interest. And as a trivia, Gone with the Wind is still the highest grossing movie ever if you adjust it to modern
inflation.
dollars. Yeah.
Well, they used to release it back in like the 70s. I know, like in Rockford where I lived, because my aunt, that was her favorite movie. And every year before people had VCRs, you had to go to the theater and see it. And she said the line was always long. And I heard other people say that where they lived, it was one of those things where it would come out like once a year, or maybe once every 5 years or something. So it's a really, really good movie.
Yeah, it was. And when we first sat down, unfortunately, they had before the movie start, they had to have some bullshit disclaimer about, it portrayed blacks as wrong or something. That's just wrong. And I'm like, no, not really. And I was like, really? And so I watched the movie, and how it portrayed blacks was pretty, I think, realistic. And if anything, the black characters they weren't villains. In fact, Mammy, was that her name? She was a very likable character, and some of the field hands were too. I don't think there was any black villain characters. And
No. Well, if anything, it almost showed them as like good characters, really. They were kind
yeah,
of loyal to their family, even though they were freed, they still stayed there, like some of them did. And that one when Scarlett was almost attacked, or she was
yeah, and
attacked and
he
probably
saved her.
raped. Yeah.
Yeah. So I really don't understand the whole issue with that. I think that's just a lot of nonsense. So, I mean, what are you going to show them? That's how they behaved, right? Their
Right.
mannerism. And it's what's interesting. I don't know, other people notice it, but how they acted back then, their basic mannerisms and how they like to dance and all that type of stuff is very similar to today. It really hasn't in many ways changed the behavior. And it's kind of interesting how, even though you go back to that time, so definitely in 1939, when they released this movie, it was not considered to be anti-Negro, as they would have called it back then at all.
No. Well, I mean, the woman that played Mammy won an Academy Award for it.
Yeah, she was the first black woman to win an Academy Award, and another one didn't win it until the 60s, Sidney Poitier or
Poitier
whatever.
for, I think
Yeah,
it was for Guess Who's Coming to Dinner.
yeah,
Is what he
propaganda
won it
movie.
for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and we'll get into that. My other thoughts about the Gone with the Wind. It kind of showed the theme of the movie was the ending of a world. That in the South they had the Confederacy and their world, and it was, in a sense, people have said that really America, or at least an old America, died at Gettysburg, and I think there's some truth to that statement. That at least for the South, that it had a not just slavery, but the whole system of the plantations and the culture. It really kind of went away after Gettysburg and the defeat of the South, and it kind of showed a world ending, and they're having to go into a new time. And I kind of thought about that poignantly, Sasha, because I feel like we're kind of living through that too. That I'm old enough, and you are too, to remember the old America, and that America is being blown away by the wind because we're being replaced. All these people pouring into our country, and there's going to be something new. The old country is just going to be gone. I kind of got that's what was in my thoughts as I watched the movie a little bit.
Oh, you have a rant.
Oh, do okay, cool.
Mhm.
Scott James, thank you. Paul, now that you should watch Carol Burnett Went with the Wind on Tube, I bet you and Sasha would enjoy it.
I've seen
Have you
it.
seen it? Is that like
Mhm.
a
It's on the
comedy?
Carol Burnett show,
Oh, okay.
like where she has the dress, when she has
Yeah.
Mammy make her that dress out of those curtains. But it's got like the big rod, like on the shoulder, like the curtain rod and everything.
Right.
They just make fun of it. It's like a parody on the Carol Burnett show where they kind of make
We'll
fun of Gone with
check
the
that
Wind.
out. Thank you for that.
Yeah,
And
it's
Carrie
funny.
Cox gave a tip, $5. My 8th grade history teacher showed us Gone with the Wind in class. Wow, that's a long. She must have done
Wow.
it for multiple sessions because it's a 4-hour movie. She was pro South, not pro slavery, and explained why values. And this is 1982 ish. Yeah, even back then you could have a more honest discussion about it.
Well, you couldn't now. You'd probably lose your job and get canceled and everything else. If you even said you were pro South, people would twist that up to take it out of context to what you meant. You know what I mean?
Right. And the movie was, it wasn't pro South, I would say, but it wasn't anti South. And now everything has to be anti South. And I think it was somewhat sympathetic towards the Confederacy a little bit. It tried it because this was made in 1839. So there would have been, they've been very old, but people's parents anyway would have been through the Civil War and remember those times. So, yeah, that would have been something people remembered. But a couple of things. I don't know really so much what they found objectionable about it. I think one thing that showed the idyllic nature of the plantation, and the Negroes seemed to be pretty happy. But that was true. That really was true in the South. There was this relationship on the plantation, and it wasn't all like beating or whipping the Negro slaves or anything like that. And there was a lot of friendships between the white people and the Negroes. I remember reading a biography about Jefferson Davis, who was the first president of the Confederacy. And one of his best friends was an overseer at his plantation that was a Negro man, and they used to go out and hunt and so forth. And it was kind of a family, really, because when they had weddings, the blacks would have weddings. They would the plantation would fund it, and they had their own system of justice, the blacks. And it was usually interesting. When the plantation owner would intervene, it was to lessen the penalty or the punishment because the overseers were actually more harsh. The black overseers to the other like field Negroes. So it was kind of the way they showed in the movie, not this whole brutal thing necessarily. I'm sure there was brutal times, but by this time in the 1860s, it had the institution was already going away. It wasn't economically feasible. And as they kind of said in the movie that they were going to get rid of the slaves anyway at one time. So it really showed in many ways there's no way that the white characters considered the Negroes to be equal to them, but there wasn't that hostility I didn't really see there. And there was even remember Scarlett O'Hara, she was chastised for being too harsh on, because after the Civil War, it wasn't like all the blacks just left. Most of them continued to work on the plantation, but they were paid, and many of them didn't like it because they didn't get free food and they had to pay for all that.
God.
Yeah, so it didn't change that much, but it showed a lot of that.
You're gonna have to go muzzle Button.
I'm going to get her. I'm sorry, guys.
Yeah, she just makes lots of noise. Oh. Yeah, it's a good movie. If you guys haven't seen it, you should check it out. And it's 4 hours long, but I didn't feel like it was 4 hours. I mean, it's an epic long movie, but it's not boring at all. I never looked at my watch or anything, so I don't know. I would assume most people have seen it, but if you haven't, check it out.
Sorry about that, guys.
That's all right.
No, she usually doesn't bark like that. I don't know what's got her going.
Well, she was barking last night here for no reason.
There must be an animal out. Usually she's really quiet, so I'm going to bring her in here so she can't look out the window, because she looks out the window and she sees animals and she gets upset. So.
But then if you let her outside, she's like scared to death.
Yeah, she is.
There was a puppy outside in the parking lot, and everyone was oohing on over this cute puppy. Yeah. And she was like, "Oh, I can't even look at the puppy. I'm so scared." Yeah,
she really was scared of that. So
it's funny.
Usually she is a sweet dog and quiet. I don't know what
she is. She's a sweet dog, but it was just getting like irritating having.
Yeah, it is. I apologize.
It's not your fault that Button's dumb.
Yes. Button, come on, be quiet. I don't know what's into you. I'm gonna have to hold you or what?
Yes.
Do you ever go to baseball games in the big city? I have a cousin on a team this year in Northwest Arkansas Naturals. We've been to a natural game years ago.
So freaking boring.
I liked it. But
it's like the most boring times I've ever been.
Hang on. I got to get out because my camera got hit up here.
Yeah, baseball is fun to play, but it's not so fun to watch. I don't know. I didn't think it was that fun. It was like 4 hours of just nothing going on. And it was hot too. It was like, I want to say we went in June or July, so it was pretty freaking hot out. And Arkansas gets hot in the summer, so it wasn't that much fun. And then my friend Brandon started talking about how he thought the Mafia was running the Naturals and all this weird stuff because that's how boring the game was. So I don't know. Paul might be down to go to that again, but I will not be going. So I don't know what's going on with Paul and his dog and everything, or the dog. Let's see. What else is here? He comes.
Sorry about that.
All right. I was trying to keep it going.
It's just like the dog's barking and the damn camera went off, and it is frustrating. I apologize for this, guys.
That's all right. It wasn't your fault. It should happen.
Super chat, $2. My windows are Kitty TV.
Yeah. Oh yeah, mine too. What were the
I don't know what was happening, Sasha, but man, you were like typing up a storm my early part of the show, so I don't know.
I was typing?
This was like
no, I wasn't typing earlier in the show.
I don't know what that was in.
I don't know.
So that
I
was
clicked on a window or two. I wasn't
maybe
typing
it's clicking
anymore.
noises or something like that. I don't know. And then Button just being a weirdo and barking like crazy. So
He is a weirdo.
I know I feel bad about this. Okay, well we'll get through this. We'll get through this because I do want to talk about Gone with the Wind because there were some interesting things about that. So I don't think it was anti-black at all. The Gone with the Wind.
Well, and maybe they had to do that because of the way women were too, because women were like, they're not like out there kicking ass, and even though Scarlet was, I mean,
Well, I disagree with that. I disagree. In fact,
well,
we
they
talked
were.
about that. I think this was one of the first strong, empowered type of women in film, or maybe not the first, but Scarlett
Scarlet was.
O'Hara was a very strong woman.
Scarlet was, but the other women were kind of giggly, and like when they had to work, they freaked out. Remember, the one was like, "Oh, my hands! They're not. These are like a worker's hands." They made it kind of like that, like they were kind of frail and scared.
Well, the upper class whites, they, and that's another thing they showed in the Southern Society in the slavery era. You had, and they made a lot of reference to white trash. There's
They
a
did.
difference from
The blacks did too. It was kind of funny.
yeah, the blacks called certain whites, the white trash versus the estate owners, which were the higher class. And the higher class whites, they wouldn't be seen around the white trash, and they made a big distinction there. And I found that interesting. So yeah, the upper class women, they kind of attended balls, were kind of silly and all that type of stuff. Even Scarlett O'Hara was pretty silly, but she had a strength about her. She developed. She basically kept everything together in the whole movie, and she would do whatever she had to do to kind of save. What was her plantation, Tara or Tara? Tara to save it. And she wasn't like the most ethical person by any means. She wasn't a goody two shoes, and that's why I think Rhett Butler was a good match for her because they were kind of similar a little bit. He was
well,
like
that's what he said all through the movie.
Yeah, and he was like a scoundrel
because he wasn't on either side of the war. Remember, at first he was just he said, "I'm on my side, or I do what's good for Rhett Butler."
Well, he got money running blockades for the South, but he didn't give a shit about it. He goes, I don't really.
What is running a blockade? You're like the Army war guy. What is?
Well, that's the North. When the war started, they put warships around the southern states, so the southern states couldn't trade with Europe, so they couldn't get in goods and ammunition, stuff like that. And running a blockade means you would have like a ship, a fast ship that would try to go past the Union Navy ships to deliver smuggling groups goods. Kind of like Han Solo. Remember Han Solo?
Oh, yeah. He was a scoundrel too.
Yeah. So that he was a smuggler running blockades, that type of things. That's what Rhett Butler is. That's how he made his millions. But he said he didn't really care about the Confederacy. But later in the movie, he had to kind of change in the heart. And even though when he knew it was a doomed cause after Gettysburg, he joined the army, the Confederate Army.
Because he felt bad.
And he ended up in prison. Yeah, he was a great character. And by the way, guys, if you ever want to learn like how to kind of be more like him than the other simps in the movie, the other simps early on were just, oh, Scarlett, you're so, can I get you a dessert? Oh, Scarlett, oh, Scarlett, you're the most beautiful woman ever. And she's just playing them all. Yeah. And Rhett Butler is just like, doesn't put up with her bullshit. And then she ends up really liking him. It was a weird thing. We don't have to worry about spoilers with Gone with the Wind because it's been out so long.
Yeah, if we spoil anything, then you've had more than enough time to see this movie.
Yeah, you've had since 1939 to see the movie. So come on. Yeah, we're not going to spoil it. So, but she had one of her things, and I was like a virgin watching this. I have never seen it before, so as my first impression, I just knew the basic outline. I had no idea of everything that would happen, like who her love. I didn't know she ever got married, let alone 3 times. And she actually had her love interest during the whole movie was this guy she couldn't have named Ashley, I believe.
Ashley, but I never understood what she saw in him. At least the actor that played him, like you think, Leslie Howard did a good job, but it's just like, I don't know.
I think what she liked in him is that he was unattainable, right? Because didn't she want him initially, and then he married her, not her
his cousin.
Yeah, because cousins used to marry more back then, and because she could never, and that lady was real sweet, a good heart, and she could never have him, but she always pined after him. And her first husband, she just married up to try to get him
It was his
jealous.
brother.
Yeah, and then he got killed in the war. And then her second husband was
Her sister's fiance, and she lied to her because she found out he had that shop.
Oh, she wanted the money to pay the taxes on that.
On Tara, they were going to lose Tara.
Right. So
she
married...
lied to the guy and told him her sister was marrying somebody else, and he got upset. And then she's like, "Can I put my hand in your pocket?" Remember that?
Mm-hmm.
And Mammy was looking at her like, "What are you up to?" And then before you know it, they're married too. It showed her signing a check because his last name was Kennedy.
Right. That's how she got her money. She had to marry to get some money to save Tara, because the carpetbaggers came down and the Yankees raised the taxes. Yeah.
It's horrible how they treated people during that. And that's like our own people. Like, that was Americans, and Americans treated Americans that way.
It was horrible.
It's just like,
as they said in the movie, the carpetbaggers that came down were worse than the soldiers, and there's a lot of truth to it. And that's where they kind of had a reference to, they didn't call it that, but that's where kind of the Klan came about, because people, they didn't have any protection, and they had to secretly have secret societies to protect, like the women, because Scarlett O'Hara was attacked in this, not by blacks even, but by these other people. So it was interesting how they referenced that too.
Yeah, it was just kind of a sad war to think that our own government would do that to people.
Oh, it was horrific. Yeah, I definitely thought that the South had a better argument of like, hey, we voluntarily joined the Union, shouldn't we be allowed to leave?
Mm-hmm.
And they had, emotionally, it was about slavery, but you remember Lincoln said to the South, if you come back, you can keep your slaves, just come back. It was about the Union. So a lot of people forget that part.
Like you said, they were going to get rid of their slaves anyway, so they should have just let them do their thing.
Well, the South had a lot of fault too. They should have just herded up and taken away that issue, saying, "Okay, we'll get rid of slavery. We understand it's not viable anymore." And that then I think if they would have seceded from the United States, there wouldn't have been the emotional argument, because a lot of people, there were draft riots in New York City and other places in the North where they didn't want to fight, because a lot of people have the attitude, well, if they just want to be their own country, well, good riddance, let them go. Why do we have to?
I kind of feel like that now.
I do too. I'm very sympathetic towards their cause. So maybe I'm a sucker for lost causes, but I still have the Confederate battle flag up here, and it was a symbol of something, not slavery, but of a people that wanted their way of life. And that was definitely, and they showed the Northerners like looting and burning. And in fact, Scarlett O'Hara, she had to kill a guy, a Union deserter that was trying to steal stuff and potentially attack her, and she shot him dead. And she was tough. She had to work in the fields after it happened and do all that. So
I like how when she killed the guy, she was just like, "Oh, I guess I killed somebody now. Yeah, I won't think about it today. I'll think about it tomorrow." She had a lot of shit on her plate. And the guy deserved it anyway. He was breaking in their house.
Yeah, he was breaking in their house, and it was it. So, and then she vowed that she would never go hungry again, because she almost starved. A lot of the Southerners were that way. And she would do whatever it took to get money, so she would never be, never lose her soil or her place.
Right.
And so that really drove her need for money, and she became very successful, but she kind of lost a lot of her relationships, which I think was part of the movie too. And because she said, hey, I don't care if I have to work with carpetbaggers, I'll do whatever I have to. Because I think she became understood, hey, we're in a new country now, and I just got to adapt. We can't go back to the old. I got to make my way in the new country. And I don't know if that was kind of a symbolic thing. Sometimes you have to change your ways when the old country's dead. And other people were stuck in the past, and she wasn't stuck in the past.
Well, they said that in the movie even. I think Ashley said that something about her, Rhett Butler, like, hey, we're watching the old South die. It's not like what it was.
And it's never coming back.
No.
And then she mentioned, because a lot of people were upset at her in the South because she was doing business with carpetbagger Yankees that would harm the Southern people. But she's like, hey, I'll do business with anyone. I got to make money to save my plantation.
Right, because she wanted to keep it, I think, especially after her mother died and everything too.
Right.
Then her father lost his mind. And
Yeah, I think there was a lot of that. So,
She had kind of a tragic life in a way. All the guys that liked her, they all died. It seemed like pretty much. Out of all the guys they started with who lived, like Ashley and Rhett Butler, everybody else got killed. Her mom died, her father died, her child
her
died. She
child
had a
died. Yeah.
miscarriage. It's just like, I don't know. And then having to work in that army hospital with all those people and their limbs blown off. And remember, she saw that guy that she
Yeah.
knew, and how heartbreaking that must have been to see all that and go through that. It's gonna change you and toughen you up. She definitely changed from how she was at the beginning of the movie to what she was like by the end of it.
Right.
And she kind of almost implied she was an alcoholic too at some point. She
Yeah,
would
she was
sneak
always
downstairs
drinking.
and
Yeah.
drink. And I don't know if women drank so much back then. I don't know, but
Yeah, it was, especially for the time they made that movie, she had some scandalous behavior,
she
really.
did. She kind of did what she wanted to. She's supposed to
Right.
be in mourning. It's like, oh, you can't go to this thing and dance. And by the end of it, she was dancing, and Rhett Butler paid however many gold coins for her to be his date. Because remember, they're
Right.
auctioning
They
off
did
money to
auction
help
off
them
dates,
for
yeah.
the Confederacy and everything.
And she was officially in mourning, but she did that anyway. And then there was when she ran her own business, they were upset that a woman was running her own business, and
Yeah, because I
she
bet
ran it
back
pretty
then
tough.
I bet
Yeah.
nobody did. Well, she was using prison people instead of
Yeah.
using the guy was like, well, you could use blacks and just pay them
Yeah.
free blacks, but she didn't want to do that because they were going to cost more. So she was using people from prison to
Yeah,
run
she was
it.
pretty hardcore. I mean, she had a lot of bad qualities. There's no doubt about that.
She
And
kind of did what she felt like she had to do to survive, I think, because I think maybe all the war and all the stuff she went through kind of traumatized her to the point where she's like, yeah, I'm not going to starve anymore or have to deal with this shit anymore.
yeah,
So
it was a quintessential movie. Oh, I didn't get to answer that question. Yeah, I do. It's cool that your cousin works for or is playing for the Naturals. I have been. We did see one of their games. Usually, to be honest, I don't like to go baseball if it's too hot, and it gets real hot here in the summer. They
yeah,
usually
that's
play
kind
in
of what I
August.
explained when you were gone. I
Yeah,
told them that, yeah, it was 4 hours of sitting in the heat because we went in June or July. Remember, it
yeah,
was in summer, and it was too freaking hot. And I said, if you want to go, you can go. Maybe Brandon will go with you. And it's just
yeah.
I'm not going to go again. No way.
Yeah, I'm not. I enjoy a time at the ballpark with the guys every once in a while. That can be fun. But yeah, I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
So,
Baseball is fun to play. It's boring to watch, I think, anyway. It seems like nothing happens for ever. You're just
mhm.
nothing's going on. I don't know. I think most sports are boring to watch anyway, except for ice skating. And that's not even really a sport.
Getting back to, I guess, Gone with the Wind while we're on that. I kind of do think that was fundamentally changed America. The South still exists, and it existed after then, but I think it radically changed it. Remember that one guy was thinking about going to New York for a job, and
Go to work in
I
a
think,
bank.
yeah, and I think you just saw a lot of people were kind of like Scarlett O'Hara's, like, okay, well, that country's gone. We got to make do in the country that we're in and do the best we can with it, which they did. So
Yeah. Well, and they lost so many people.
they did. It
It's
was a bloodbath.
it's crazy how many people died in that war.
Yeah, I kind of thought what, in current events, what's happening to Ukraine. They're losing men at that scale too, in that bloodbath. It's hard to imagine because we've never experienced anything like that except for the Civil War. Even in World War II and World War One, we didn't lose that many based on the percent of our population compared to the Civil War.
Well, we have at
Almost
least we have
everyone.
better medical stuff now
Well,
too.
that's true. Yeah.
So if you do get hurt, it's I mean, you might die, but at least you can get antibiotics and stuff. Whereas back then, my God, they were amputating that guy's leg, and that was
Yeah.
even though they didn't show it, you could picture in your mind how awful that
Yeah.
was. It was almost just as gruesome hearing about it as it was to see it.
Yeah. You don't have to
Stuff
show
like that.
everything to make it pretty gruesome. So that was the thing. And you're right though about how that has changed. And another thing, because I had a relative, I want to find those letters. My grandma had them, my dad had them. I wish I could find them, but it was a guy from Indiana who was on the Union side writing to his mother because he was dying, not of a bullet wound, but of disease. So many died of disease during that war too,
They
because they
did.
didn't have this sanitation. They didn't have the medical treatment for infections and stuff, and it just took so many people. It was just amazing.
I have some books that are letters. They're just books that women had written, or I guess they
Mhm.
wrote with soldiers back during Civil War times. I have some of those. I haven't read them though, but they'll
Mhm.
probably be sad. And I imagine like what a horrible time that was.
Right. And there were some battles here in Arkansas. Pea Ridge is a big one, but nothing major like back east. But we had a few. We were considered the west part, and Arkansas was on the side of the Confederacy. Even though this part of Arkansas didn't have any plantations because we don't have the environment for it here, but in southern Arkansas they did. So um, it was I do think slavery was probably the worst thing that happened to this country, in bringing Africans over was a disaster we still haven't recovered from, really.
No, we probably never will.
That was the thing early on in this country where I think the founding fathers made a mistake is they said, no, this country is going to be for us, however they define us, but not for like Africans or and the problem was, because it was even an issue at the Revolutionary War, is many people they didn't think of the future because they thought of slaves as property or as like livestock.
Right, even though they're people.
Right, but they thought they would always be like that, so they didn't. Well, that's why everyone, when they're talking about equality and all that type of stuff, they're like, how can they do that when they how can Thomas Jefferson talk about all men are created equal when he has slaves? And that's like, well, not to be crude, that'd be like, how could he write all men are created equal when he has cows or horses?
Right.
Then
They
he doesn't
didn't.
treat
They thought
he
only.
didn't treat the cows or the horses like humans or like white men, and that's
Right.
just, they had a distinction. And it may sound mean, but that is truly what a lot of them thought. So they didn't really think it out well. Yeah, but ideally, what would have happened is if they would have prohibited slavery from the very beginning. I think that was a mistake.
They should have, and then all those people wouldn't have died either, and all those people wouldn't have had to be
Right.
enslaved, and we wouldn't have all these people bitching about it now, 400 years later, where they're still complaining about it.
Well, for the most part, we wouldn't have had a black population even now. And so it would have radically changed this country is if
Or
it,
200 years later.
yeah, it would have radically changed the country if the founding fathers said, no, slavery's not allowed. You can't bring Africans over here or anything like that. You can't bring Chinamen in to do stuff. I mean, this is our country. It would have, I think, solved so many problems. I mean, maybe now we'd still have the immigration issues and all that, but yeah.
Yeah, well, now everybody everywhere is getting
Yeah.
people, it seems like, or at least European countries or outposts.
Right. Yeah.
Because America is kind of like a European outpost, or it was, like Australia, New Zealand, all those places where it's like majority European.
But the problem is this is an example where people just put their own interests before the future.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the slave owners at the time were like, well, what do you mean? No, we're not going to give up our property. What are you talking about? This is how we make our living. And
right. They didn't care about the good for,
what would happen in the future.
Right.
So even if you could sit down and tell them, well, no, wait a minute, they're not going to be slaves forever. They're going to breed and then we're going to have issues. They would have probably thought, I don't care. I won't be a lot around then.
Right. Well, you see that now with the elites
Yeah.
flooding our country.
Mm-hmm.
They don't give a shit about anybody's grandkids or kids or
Right.
what the future is going to have to deal with. I mean, these people didn't give a shit when they did what they did. Then now we still have to pay for it.
There's so many what ifs, because there's what if like Lincoln hadn't been killed, because Lincoln, everyone says, oh, he's a great emancipator. But if you read his writings, he said, he was clear he didn't consider the Negro and the white man to be the same. And he made it clear that he wanted to ship the slaves back to Africa. That was his goal. But he was assassinated, and that never happened. I don't know if he would have been able to do that anyway, to be honest, or if that would have been an issue. I don't know. But it's an interesting what if would have happened.
Well, and black people had slaves, and Indians and other people.
Oh yeah, they did too. Yeah, blacks had slaves.
They didn't seem to have a lot of them didn't seem to have a problem with their own people being enslaved.
Well,
you see
slavery.
this?
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just saying, well, you see it now with like a lot of these white people. They don't care about shitting on other white people. They'll do it if it's
Sure.
convenient for them or.
Well, we saw it with getting back to the movie Gone with the Wind. Scarlett O'Hara didn't give a damn these white guys being used as slave labor that were prisoners.
Yeah.
And, you know, the one guy was trying to tell her after it was like, well, this is demeaning to these are like Southern boys that you're using as prison labor. Shouldn't you could hire blacks to do this job? No, this is cheaper. And so that is even that, you know. So
yeah, well, you see that now.
Yeah.
People would rather ship their jobs overseas because they save like 50 cents on a t-shirt or whatever. To now where it's almost impossible if you are like somebody starting out that wants to start a business, it's hard to even get things made here because you are going to have to pay a lot more for it, but it didn't used to be that way.
You actually made that's a great analogy you have there, because it's sort of like outsourcing their jobs that we saw of our factories or our programming jobs, because the same people that say, oh, I couldn't imagine doing slavery, they are the same people are happy sending your jobs overseas because they make extra money. If they lived back then, they'd be happy to do it to make extra money too.
And they probably have slaves too.
Yeah.
Because they wouldn't give a shit. I mean, they just like the virtue signal, but.
Well, slavery, by the way, is the most common thing in human history. Throughout all of human history, slavery was just a common.
Romans they just blame white people for it.
Yeah, but it wasn't the case. Every culture had it, and Romans had slaves that were white. It was just considered normal. So we were the only people really to end slavery.
Yeah, and all these people died because of it.
Yes,
but you don't get a thank you. You just
that's our reparation. This is the 600,000 people that died. That's a reparation.
That's how many people died. 600,000.
Yeah,
that's a lot.
Especially
and how many people lived in America back then?
That's what I mean. It wasn't hardly. The population was so small, and they were almost all white. There was a few blacks that fought. It's funny, some blacks fought on the Confederate side, but it was like 98% white.
I remember they said that in the movie, like that was a Big Sam, or the guy that worked on the plantation. Scarlett ran into him, and he said that they'd freed them, but they was signing up for the Confederacy.
Yeah.
You know, even though they were slaves, they still were fighting because they probably saw a lot of people in the South as kind of like their people, or
they did. They considered
it.
Yeah, and that was the life they knew, and it wasn't. And to be fair, like I said earlier, and this is documented, their lives didn't necessarily improve right away. In some cases, it went worse because they had to pay for their lodging and their food, and they were still doing this exact same job. Right. They didn't have any other skills. So it's like, okay, we'll just pay you now, when they were paying them indirectly anyway via food and medicine and, you know, the whole bit.
Right.
So now that the plantation owners didn't have to bother with that, and they could just do that. Let me see what you got. You got a...
You got a what?
No, I just heard some clicking in the background. I didn't know if there's something happening.
Louise is over here cleaning herself.
Maybe that's it. It's been a noisy night.
Well, Button
I know Button was like a disruptive. Yeah, that it was good to see. It was good to see a perspective of 1939, what people thought of the South, and it was interesting. There was less of a division between hatred of the Confederacy in 1939 than there is now, right? 1939, you could still have Confederate battle flags up. You could still say Robert E. Lee was a hero, and even people in the North wouldn't have a problem with that. So it's funny how we've devolved opposite. You think it'd be more hatred back then, but it's actually increased now. So yeah, that's it.
I wonder why that is, just because of the brainwashing, I guess.
I think so. I think
people. Yeah. I think a lot of people just don't even understand like what really went on. They just think it was all just about slavery. And
oh, we got a $10 from K-Max. Thank you, K-Max. Ramsey, the NPR interviewer, claimed America's wealth was merely came from slavery. When asked if it made Africa and Middle East prosperous, he went silent. Clearly, slavery was not what made America wealthy. Yeah, that's another myth we get. Blacks built America. That's ridiculous. They were slaves. They picked cotton. And they did some other menial labor, but they did not build, America. In fact, most America, except for the Deep South, you could go your whole life without seeing another black. In fact, it's very unusual to see a black.
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking before the Civil War. If you were in New England, you would not see a black.
Well, you got to think now they're what 13% of the population.
Yeah.
So what were they back then? And so of course you're not going to see them unless
they
you
were.
live in the
I would
South.
say maybe around 10% of the population, but they were all concentrated just in the deep South.
Right, until after slavery, and then a lot of them went up north. But still, if you're not
they weren't the ranchers, the prospectors, the farmers, the businessmen, and none of that. The architects. I'm not to say there's anything wrong with that, but that's a myth. And slavery already at that time was going out of vogue anyway, and because it wasn't economically viable. Because
there were machines kind of like a new thing too, though, where they had more machinery that could.
Well, the cotton gin was taking over.
Yeah, the cotton gin.
You didn't need the field hands to pick cotton. You could do that automated, and all of that was changing. So
they probably save a lot of money to just be able to do that. It's kind of like how they automate all the jobs now.
Well, the economics of slavery wasn't working because it was so expensive to maintain the slaves, and despite the propaganda. I mean, maybe like 100 years earlier from the Civil War, there's a lot more brutality. But by that time, even the slaves had certain rights. You just couldn't kill a slave. And there was a lot of restrictions on how you had to do things. So it did cost them quite a bit of money on lodging and food and all that type of stuff. And it wasn't economically viable. It was going out anyway. So that is true. But yeah, slavery didn't make America great. I would say the opposite. It created prosperous. I would say it was the opposite.
Well, it's kind of almost like a stain now on the country that we never can live down, or no matter how much you apologize or how many people died for it, you still have to hear about it. Or, oh, you were related to a slaveholder. I mean, it's just, I don't know. Like you said, it would have been nice if we didn't have that never been possible, but they didn't have a crystal ball. Maybe if the founding fathers did, they could have said, yeah. Because I think, like you said, some of these people wouldn't have given a damn. They would have sold us down the river and done it anyway. But if it was made illegal where they weren't allowed to, then.
Yeah, I would have liked that. But the problem is, that's a big what if, because in reality, if the founding fathers tried to prohibit slavery, the South would have never came in the original Revolutionary War against Britain. So it was a non-starter. Politically, they couldn't have done that. So I get it. But it was a disaster at that time.
So were you disappointed that the movie wasn't more about the war? Like, then part of it was about, or a big chunk of it was about like a love story.
Well, I knew it was a love story. I want to say I was disappointed. I didn't know what to expect. I thought it just took place in the Civil War. It surprised me that half the movie was really after the Civil War during Reconstruction. And I didn't mind that. I just was surprised about that. And it was more of a love story than but it kind of reminded me, and I told Sasha this as we're driving out, the movie Dr. Zhivago. It's a love story, but the backdrop is the Russian Revolution and communism. And this is a love story where the backdrop is another upheaval time during the American Civil War.
And they're both based on books, and they're both really long movies.
Yeah, long movies.
and they have the overture, the music, and everything. I think the music in Gone with the Wind's really good. I kind of forgot about it till it started playing. I was like, oh yeah, that's the theme from Gone with the Wind. Because I haven't seen it in a while. I kind of forgot some of the stuff. Some of the stuff always stands out.
Going over the acting, I think Vivian Leigh, I guess she was British, right?
Yes.
And she was good. Oh, we got another one. Seems a higher class of blacks on the East Coast than Chicago. I think because of the house versus the field ones in Washington. And then a lot of them migrated to the South and who moved to New York and Pennsylvania. And Chicago got all the bottom. I don't know. I think there is. Thank you, Harold Cat, for that. I really do appreciate it. I think. Well, they did make that distinction too, and it's just a fact. Is everything okay, Sasha?
Sorry, I'm just taking the foil off these coins while we talk.
Oh, that's what's creating the noise, and there's a lot of background noise, and that's what
background. Well, Louise is over here licking herself too.
That was the foil. Yeah, that was creating noise. I didn't know what that was. But yeah, in the movie, they not only did they show the social distinction between the whites, between I don't know what they called the elite whites, but plantation crowd, and the white trash, but you had the field blacks that I think were a lower status than the house servants, and they made reference to that. So that was definitely the case. So thanks on that. And uh, let's see here. I had another thought, but I just lost it from that. Uh,
The
but
acting. You're talking
oh,
about
the
the
acting.
acting.
Yes, you're acting. I would say that Vivian Lee, she was British, but I thought she did a good job on that. She was a good actress, and that was her first big role, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think well, she was like a stage actress, and she dated Laurence Olivier. I think they were
Mm-hmm.
married. They were
Mm-hmm.
together a long time, but I'm not sure how they got her for that. They interviewed like or auditioned just about every actress in Hollywood at the time, and I know the big thing was like people wanted Betty Davis to do it, but I don't think Betty Davis was like she didn't. I like Betty Davis, but she didn't have that thing about her like Vivian Lee did, where I couldn't imagine all these guys like, oh, can I get you another piece of pie? Like, but she doesn't have the looks or the kind of personality that Vivian Lee had to be able to pull that off.
And Clark Gable, he's the only one that could have played that, I think.
Yeah, I don't know back then what other actor could have done him.
They were excellent, and the black lady that played Mammy, she did a really good job.
Yeah,
She
Hattie
was a good
McDowell,
actress.
she was good. And
She
then
was
I
a great
thought
actress.
Olivia de Havilland was good too, and Leslie Howard as Melanie and Ashley.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they were good actors. So I thought the acting was good. The story was good. I mean, it kept going. It was long, but the plot. I like plot-driven stories, and there wasn't like meaningless fighting that went on forever.
Well, and it
So
wasn't like I don't remember looking at my watch. Like I don't look at
no,
my watch, and if it was boring, I would have been looking at my watch like, when
right,
is this going to be over? But it's
right.
entertaining. I thought the costumes were great too, and
Mm-hmm.
the sets and everything were really good.
Yeah, I did that too, and it was pretty epic when they showed all the injured soldiers because they
Hmm.
couldn't do that now. I mean,
All those
because of
bodies.
CGI. Yeah, now they'd have CGI, but there they had actors, and
Well,
it
did you
was
notice like
impressive.
it looked like part of it was drawn or
Yeah,
painted?
well, it
Like you could
was.
kind of see it was like it looked cool
Yeah,
the way they did it though.
it was.
It was
Yeah, some
almost
of the
like a
backdrops they
story,
did.
like the way it was, like almost like a
Mm-hmm.
storybook.
Mm-hmm.
So, are you going to read the book now that you should read the book. The book's really, really good. It's better
Yeah.
than the movie. It's long, but it's good.
Mm-hmm.
I've got the audiobook.
Are the characters basically the same?
From what I remember, I don't remember a lot. I remember it goes into more descriptions. It went into some descriptions about Indians that would probably be problematic now too,
Mm-hmm.
about them being kind of brutal and
Right.
because I remember thinking, oh, you couldn't do this now. I like to go to the house. They have Margaret Mitchell's home
Mm-hmm.
outside of Atlanta. That's the lady that wrote it, and I think that's the only book she ever wrote. It's
Mm-hmm.
like she just had this one great book in her and nothing else. And then they wrote a sequel to it in the early '90s called what was it called? So I think it was just called Scarlet. And I think
Oh,
it
I
was
remember
about her
that,
trying
and
to.
I heard that really flopped though and wasn't good.
My aunt read it and she was excited about it because Gone with the Wind was like her favorite book and
Mm-hmm.
movie, and she didn't like it. So I
Yeah.
don't know. I've always kind of stayed away from it, but I think Mosca told me it wasn't that bad. So I
Mm-hmm.
don't know. Maybe it's one of those things where you're like, yeah, it's never going to be. It's not going to be Gone with the Wind. Like it's just the different writer. It's how many years later? 70 years at the time later, or how? No, longer than that. I don't know when Gone with the Wind was written. Probably the early 1900s,
Mm-hmm.
maybe the 30s. I don't know. I'd have to look that up, but it's just not going to be the same. It's kind of
Right.
like nowadays they have all these people like Michael Crichton has been dead for what, over a decade, and there's all these people writing like Michael Crichton books now, or V.C. Andrews. They might get some of the manuscripts that
Mm-hmm.
they had, and then they finish them, but they're never the same. And so with
Yeah.
the Scarlet book, I don't think they had any kind of manuscript. It was just somebody going rogue and writing their own thing about Scarlet. And I'm not sure if it was about her trying to get Rhett back or what. They made a movie out of it, so it sold well enough that people, went to watch this movie. I think it was a TV movie back in the day.
Do you think she really wanted him back, or was that she was just trying to use him because she needed someone and she didn't really love him? Because there was that scene even when they first got married, he even said, "Well, you're just marrying me because of my money." And she said, "Well, that's not the only reason, but
Yeah,
it was,
you're like partly.
yeah,
I don't
partly."
know. I think by the end she did love him
Hmm.
because she realized like they were meant to be together. I think, but it was too late.
Well, she
And
just
then
had that realization when she realized she couldn't have Ashley, and it's funny because the minute Ashley was available, it kind of fell apart. She didn't pine for him anymore because his wife died or whatever.
yeah,
So yeah, I don't know. It's kind of an interesting
I
thing.
felt like by the end she did like him because remember when he got drunk and took her upstairs and she was in like this great mood.
Oh,
You thought like, oh, they're gonna make up, and then like he was kind of a dick to her, and then like their relationship just kind of fell apart. I think then it was kind of almost like she knew then, and when he came back, she was happy to see him.
well, they always had that. They always had that spark from the very first moment they met.
Yeah,
Because other guys kind of bored her, and the only reason I think she liked Ashley is because he was kind of unavailable, kind of idealist type of thing.
well, he
Uh,
was the only one that wasn't like all over throwing himself at her like everybody else.
right. Yeah. And it's kind of a way because all these guys throwing themselves at her, she just found disgusting. They were, in modern terms, they were really simping her.
Yeah.
She was just like, "Ugh, you're just creeping me out." So, and whereas Rhett Butler was not at all that way, she found that kind of exciting. So, there's something to learn there, I guess. So, and yeah, I thought that was the dynamics there were pretty good there. Let me just see if we got everything here. Oh, we got some more.
Power chats.
Yes, or super chats. Gone with the Wind never does cover what you would do with the slaves once the war was over. Having no plan that cost us so much this day, the idea of living them here all afterwards. Let me read this again. I'll read this, put this up. You can read it too, Sasha. Gone with the Wind never does cover what you would do with the slaves after the war was over. I'll just deal with that sentence. I don't think Gone with the Wind, it had a backdrop of the Civil War and Reconstruction, but it really wasn't a movie about slavery.
Or the
That was
politics of
yeah, no.
slavery. It was just
It
more about like here's a
this
movie
is
that takes
this is
place
what
during this
happened.
time,
Right. Yeah.
and it
It wasn't
showed
about
some of the bad things that happened during the war.
yeah, it showed bad, how the carpetbaggers were bad and how there was a lot of northerners that tried to exploit the southerners. And it wasn't anti-South, but it wasn't a political movie in a sense talking about slavery.
Well, remember
Having
they?
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just saying. Remember at the beginning when Rhett Butler said him and I think it was Ashley and they were talking and they're having the meeting with everybody wanting to go to war, and they
Hmm.
were like, "Yeah, these wars tend to be horrible, and then
Yeah,
people start these wars, and then when they're over, you don't even remember what the hell you started it for."
right.
And so it was more just kind of like about like look at how horrible the war is. So I don't think it was like they sat around thinking about like what do we do with the slaves now, because like you said, it really wasn't about the slaves. That was just a part of it.
Hmm. And having no plan for that cost us all so much to this day. Well, yeah, I mean, that wasn't really thought out like what would happen today, in our cities and
Or
all.
just like the outsourcing and all that, like we were
Yeah,
talking about earlier, like how many people, like a couple people said like what's going to happen when you send
yeah,
all the jobs overseas. It's the same thing. Nobody thinks
right.
about it. Or the immigration policies, maybe it's not a good idea to let 1 million people in a year, because they don't give a shit. Well, it's the same with that. Nobody cared.
Yeah, so it
Except
came
the
next,
slaves that couldn't get jobs, I'm sure they cared.
right. I think it was I don't even I even in the 30s when they did the movie, they didn't really understand the total impact. I don't think still, because it was still very segregated, the country.
Well, they wouldn't even let the lady that played Mammy go to the premiere in Atlanta
Right, because she's
because they
black.
had, yeah,
Yeah,
back in it was 39 when the movie came out.
right. So it was definitely viewed differently back then, and hindsight's 2020. We're like, obviously, why did you do this? But at the time, you have to kind of put yourself in their situation, and And like all wars is so common, they think everyone's excited for it to happen. It's going to be over quick. Even this recent one with Ukraine, remember Ukraine's going to win right away, and
Yeah.
everyone's all excited. But as wars drag on, the excitement for it kind of dissipates.
Well, and you see when people are dying, and
Right,
it's
exactly.
really horrific. Like people want it to end.
World War I was that way. Both sides thought the war would be over in 6 months, and the Civil War, both sides thought it'd be over real quick. That each side would win real quick, and it just didn't happen. So, there was really no way the South to win, because even Rhett Butler saw that, because the North had all the manufacturing machinery and all that, and the South.
Well, he said that at the beginning. Remember?
Yeah, and he was right.
Like, yeah, and then they got mad at him.
Yeah, they don't want to hear that. Yeah.
Right. Well, it's kind of like you with other subjects. You tell people shit they don't want to hear, they get mad at you.
Well, to the degree you another war now with Russia and Ukraine, it's like there's no way Ukraine can win, because Russia has so much better manufacturing, more people, bigger army, but they don't want to hear that.
Haven't they killed most of the people anyway? Like
a lot of them, yeah. It's like the Civil War. It's almost like, you can put the Russians as like the Yankees and Ukraine as the Confederates, if you want to do all the parallel. Not by, obviously it's not based on slavery or anything like that, but you know what I mean. And the sizes, there's just, from the beginning of the war, the best that the South could have hoped for in the Civil War was the North would have got tired of the war and agree to stop and say, okay, well, we're tired of this war, we're just going to let you go. But the South was never going to conquer the North. They just didn't have the manufacturing. They didn't have a number of men. They didn't have the population, because most of the South back then, except for Atlanta and Charleston and a few other cities, it was a very rural, much more rural than it is now. So,
well, they had the government on their side too. The North did.
Yeah.
Like you have the backing of the federal government. Like what did the South have?
Well, they had their state armies.
Yeah, but still, compared to like the rest of the.
Well, no, you're right. They had a much bigger army in the North. They had more artillery, the whole 9 yards. They did in the South.
Well, didn't Rhett even said they didn't even have any like canning, like they didn't even have probably anything. They made
cannons.
Like, yeah.
And it was and it's true, right? It was a supply issue. That's a lot of times war just comes down to not who's the most heroic, because you remember the Southerners, and they really did think this, that, oh, one Southern man can whip or lick, they would call back then, meaning kick the ass of 10 Northerners, which wasn't true, but it was, the Southern soldiers were brave and good and strong, but it all comes down to logistics. How much weapons do you have? Cannons, bullets, all that. If you can't feed your army and you can't give them proper supplies, it doesn't really matter how heroic.
Well, they didn't have shoes.
Yeah, that is true. They ran out of shoes. Yeah.
Like you said, a lot of disease knocked them out.
Yep.
We saw in that hospital, it was like that one doctor treating like how many people?
Mm-hmm.
And I know it was just a movie, but I'm sure a lot of that was pretty close to the truth.
We got another one from Harold's Cat. Auntie Lou's really new men. Her gentlemen prefer blondes. 1926.
Oh, Anita Lou's.
Anita Lou's, sorry, I can't see very well, is a masterpiece. Have you seen that movie?
Oh, yeah. I've got the book too. It's Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, but They Marry Brunettes or something like that.
Oh, okay, yeah.
You saw that movie with Marilyn Monroe.
Oh,
it's the one where she was
in 1926. Okay.
No, the book probably did. It's based on a book.
Oh,
but you saw the movie with me. It had Marilyn Monroe.
That was a good movie. It's fun.
Yeah.
Thank you, Harold. That was good. I like old movies. It's very rare that you can get a good movie anymore, just because they're so political and they're so woke.
The one yesterday was good though. Once in a while, I want to come
on. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, every once in a while, I try to screen them, but yeah.
Or silly movies. Like I like silly movies. Like I'll probably go see that Abigail. I think that's what it's called, about that girl that's a vampire. They kidnap her.
Yeah.
To get like ransom, and you find out she's a vampire.
Mm-hmm.
And then she's going to kill all these people. It's silly. It's kind of like Cocaine Bear or something, or Megan, where you don't expect like a great plot, but it's just fun, and hopefully it's not political or shoving anything down your throat.
Yeah, I think that that's kind of good point. I don't know. So I guess kind of that's my thoughts of Gone with the Wind. If you guys haven't seen it, I'm probably the last guy has never saw it to see it. Probably a lot of young people haven't seen it, because they try to the movie's problematic now. So I bet there's a lot of people who haven't seen it, Sasha. Now
Oh,
I
I
used to
know
be
people
like,
that haven't seen it.
yeah,
I
I
bet
would
a lot of young
recommend it. I
people.
would recommend it. It is a good movie. It's entertaining. It's not really dated for the most part. It's people are the people. They have their little love affairs and so forth, and it gives you a feel for the old South before the Civil War, during the Civil War, and during Reconstruction. That was kind of the background. And
Yeah, and the year that it came out was supposed to be considered one of the best years for movies ever in the history of movies, and that's probably a good case to be made because you think The Wizard of Oz came out that year. Mr. Smith Goes to Washington came out that year, and it's funny they said before the movie, they always have the guy with the crooked teeth talk, Leonard Maltin, and he was talking about the guy that played her father, Scarlett's father, in Gone with the Wind, actually won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor for Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. So it's kind of funny. He was in 2 movies that year, but there's a lot of other good movies that came out that year, like Ninotchka. You never saw that? We should watch that sometime. It has Greta Garbo in it, and she plays like a Russian that comes to America, and it's good. It's a comedy because they always said Garbo laughs because Garbo was always very serious, but in this it's kind of she's serious in this too, but this guy gets her to laugh. But that was a movie that was nominated for Best Picture, and I think Jezebel came out in 1939 with Betty Davis was also, and that movie I believe takes place like during Civil War times too, if I'm not mistaken. But there's a lot of really great movies that came out that year.
Yeah, it's good to have like movies with a background or backdrop of like the Civil War or some epic event. I think that adds to it quite a bit.
Well, back then, I mean, they were about making money, but I think that they also wanted to make something really grand and epic. And so they would spend the time and the money on it. Now, they might get mad at the director or whoever for going over budget, but at the same time, they'd usually make their money back if it was really good. Like Gone with the Wind, I'm sure they spent like an arm and a leg on that movie. You saw all the costumes and extras, and 4-hour movie is not going to be something you can make probably in a few weeks.
No, I was just thinking how long it would take to edit that movie.
I can imagine how long it
and all the screenings and everything they had to do.
Yeah.
I mean, they made like everything. They could make movies faster back then, but still, it had to take a long time.
Well, they spent I don't know how much time interviewing or auditioning all the actresses in Hollywood to play that. Like they auditioned for everybody, just try to find the perfect Scarlett.
Yeah,
that's a lot of times nowadays. I don't think they get the perfect people because they hire people based on like what skin color you are or whatever. They don't really try to always get the best person. I even kind of thought that with Hunger Games. I didn't really think Jennifer Lawrence was like she was kind of a popular star at the time, so they gave it to her. Can you imagine nowadays them giving something like Gone with the Wind to almost an unknown? Yeah. I mean, how they wanted the right person, and they were willing to gamble on somebody that was an unknown, really.
Right, Vivian Leigh, right?
Yeah, from another country, and she was perfect.
Yeah, that gamble did pay off. It really did. And yeah, it was. I would recommend the movie if you guys get a chance. I mean, it's a long movie, so if you rent it, make sure you get plenty of time to watch it. But it's well worth the effort, I think.
It is.
All right, is that about it, Sasha? Or
I guess so. We got some postcards from Michael D, and I think you got some other stuff, but you probably forgot to thank people.
Yeah, I'll get those last time.
But thank you.
Week. Yeah,
I know. I owe a song to someone too, and you're gonna.
Oh yeah, and I got a special video making. You got a song to sing karaoke.
Right. So when I'm over my cold, and
yeah, we'll do that.
I'll try to do it next weekend.
All right.
I should be well by then.
All right. Well, I'll see you guys tomorrow at the Ramsey Paul Show at 11 a.m. and tomorrow's the Eclipse Day, Monday. And we will guys talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.
Bye.